You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast.
Hello, this is Jo. This week on the podcast, we have an interview with a woman named Terri. And this is a special interview because it's actually part of a two-part series. So Michelle and Terri originally spoke in late 2017, which is the interview that you'll actually be hearing today. And then next week, we'll have part 2, which is the conversation that Michelle and Terri had earlier this year in 2019. So without further ado, here we go.
Hey, it's Michelle. Today, I'm super excited. This is with a wonderful, loving woman named Terri. And Terri is a light, let me tell you. She is just radiating love and healing and confidence. You can tell this is a woman who has done her work, who has taken great risks. And let me tell you, they've paid off. She's bold enough to state her boundaries and enforce them. And she knows when enough is enough. Today, you're going to hear us talk about divorce for the second time and how it's never ever too late to create the life that you've always wanted. I found such amazing hope in this interview with Terri, and I just wanted to reach through the phone and give her a big high five multiple times. I think you're going to feel your heart filling up from her enthusiasm for her future. Cheering each other on is a huge part of our recovery. And when one of our sisters experiences a victory, we all do. Like I said before, there's never any judgment about staying versus leaving. We are just happy for one another. So, have a listen and let your heart be filled with hope.
In just a minute, I'm going to read 3 statements. And as I'm reading them, I want you to think about each one and see if it applies to you. If it doesn't apply, that's totally fine. Just listen for the next. But if it does apply, then we have something for you. Okay, here we go. Number 1, I know that I want to stay with my partner suffering from addiction. Number 2, I'm really not sure if I want to stay with my partner or if I might want to think about leaving. I just don't know. Number 3, I know that I want to leave my partner suffering from addiction. Can you raise your hand in agreement to any of those situations? If you can, then we encourage you to check out the Love Over Addiction Stay or Go program. In it, you'll find solutions to every one of these situations, no matter where you are today. Go to loveoveraddiction.com/stay-or-go. Here's what one woman had to say about the Stay or Go program. There is so much good information in this program. Whether you stay or go, you will need this info if you want to work on choosing happiness over chaos. It's worth the money, it's worth the time, and it's worth the work. And if you're not feeling ready to consider your options right now, that's fine too. There's never any pressure, and we'll certainly never try to convince you one way or the other. The decision is completely yours. When you're ready, you can go to loveoveraddiction.com/stay-or-go.
Okay, thank you so much again for agreeing to talk with me and share your story. How did you meet your husband, and when did you know when did you start to see red flags? When did you start to notice there might be an issue around his drinking?
Let's see. I met my husband. He was actually living next door. I had just moved to a new city, and he was the next door neighbor, being very friendly and helpful. And I did not really see any signs of problem drinking until about 2009, when he got he got 2 DUIs in the same year. So, yeah, and I met him in 1995. So we did have some good years before that.
Did you see his drinking progress over the years? Were you questioning whether he had a problem and then the DUIs kind of confirmed it? Or
yeah, okay, that's what happened. And he pretty much when he retired is when the alcohol addiction got out of hand.
So do you think it was the lack of structure and the lack of purpose in his life, where he just kind of got lost? Or
I would say yes, because he does have ADHD, and he does not take he was not taking medications for that. So I definitely think that had a big part in that, because he liked structure.
Yeah. Well, a lot of us need structure. It's very healthy in our lives. And when you take it away and we don't have something, a schedule or expectations on us, particularly those with addiction issues, you can kind of get lost and I don't want to say lazy, but, not having a purpose can make you feel very degraded. So what was your reaction when he had the DUIs?
Well, I was deep in my codependency. So I bailed him out. And I thought, well, this is very odd. And of course, he was able to explain it away, and it wasn't his fault. That was, and it took me about 2 years to really figure out. It's like, wait a minute, if this wasn't a problem, he wouldn't be continuing to drink and to get behind the wheels.
So you are deep in your codependency. I love that you are taking responsibility and accountability for that. That's brilliant. And so you bailed him out. How are you feeling? Were you worried? Were you angry? Were you all of the above?
Oh boy. I was worried, and at that point I was also scared that perhaps he was waiting. I mean, I was seriously codependent. So not just a mild case, I was full-blown codependent. So the anger came.
What makes you explain some of the behaviors for the women out there who are listening and going, well, am I seriously codependent? What does that mean? What should I be on the lookout for?
Oh my gosh. Just the whole idea. Here he is in trouble with the law, getting a DUI, and I'm worried that I'm not driving fast enough to be there waiting when he gets out on bail. It's like it was all my responsibility to make sure that he didn't have any discomfort regarding his own behavior. I was totally taking on that responsibility of his reactions.
Right, and you were not allowing him to pay the consequences of his actions.
Not at all. No, it was still all about making sure that he was happy, and I knew he would be angry because he'd just gotten arrested, and I knew he'd be hungover, so it was all about just trying to make his life easier so he wouldn't explode and get more upset with me. So,
gosh, that's
the anger.
I love that. Yeah, so let's talk about the anger. So you were afraid of his anger.
Yes. And it came after I brought him home and he just started punching holes and kicking holes in a wall.
Wow.
And destroying the sheetrock. And I had my phone in hand just in case I needed to make a 911 call. But I just let him go ahead and do that. And so that hole in the wall sat for 8 months. And every time I would walk past that, that's when I started to get angry. It's like, this is ridiculous. This is not a normal behavior.
So that hole just kind of served as a visual reminder for you of the dysfunction that was going on in your home.
Yes.
Do you feel like that hole in the wall was sort of not just symbolic, but maybe helpful in a way?
That is when it started to turn for me, and I saw that this really, including my own behavior, my reactions to his drinking and his behavior, that I knew it wasn't normal. But I wasn't quite ready to open my eyes and look farther. So I felt like I almost just became more of an ostrich sticking my head in the sand.
Right, the denial.
Yeah, oh, big time, big time. So, and yeah, he's a contractor. So I thought, okay, he shouldn't wait 8 months to fix that hole in the wall.
Right. That does not surprise me. Let's talk about the denial, because oftentimes we deny because we're afraid. And so what do you think you were afraid of? Why was the truth scary to you?
Okay, well, my denial was because this was my second marriage. I had already felt like a failure having gone through one divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And
was your first husband an alcoholic or had any issues with addiction?
Model airplanes was his addiction.
Really?
I don't think he wanted to be. I don't think he really wanted to be married and be a father.
Do you feel like the rejection that you felt from this man that you loved, that you know, who promised you to give you his attention for the rest of his life, and then he turned all of his attention to anything that he felt was rewarding or fun? Did you feel like when your second husband came along, the attention that he was offering you was sort of the validation that you had been missing in your first marriage?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it, exactly. Yes, because
but what's
just
interesting
all of a sudden,
about that is that validation that you were looking for from a sick man, right?
yes,
is now the actual thing that brought you right back to the original feelings that you were feeling in your first marriage, which is rejection.
true. That's very, oh boy. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. So so what I love about this, and this is where we all are, is that we need to stop looking towards others to find that validation, that self-acceptance, and that self-love. So here you are, you said, you're in denial. And when did things start for you to start going, okay, I know this isn't normal. I'm not ready to, I'm ready to start picking my head up out of the sand. When did that occur?
So I stayed in denial for quite a while because I didn't want to give up and be, like I said, a divorcee for a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I finally decided that I had to look at the common denominator. He had lost pretty much all of his friends. We didn't have any couple friends anymore. The couple friends we did have were serious heavy drinkers. and I didn't enjoy my time around them. And then this was the kickers. My best friend, we've been best friends since we were 12. So over 40 years we've been best friends. My husband offered to do some work at her new house that she bought. And he had to do it while he was drinking, of course. And she finally just lost it, and she said, I will not tolerate this behavior in my house. She told me that she goes, I don't know how you can. I can't get him out of my house. So wow. At that time, of course, I took, how could you kick me out? And it wasn't she was kicking me out. I understand her difference now. But at the time, I drove my husband away. We stayed in a motel because it was out of town. So,
I'm just thinking about you in that situation, and I'm thinking about being deep in codependency. Did you kind of feel betrayed by your best friend?
Absolutely. That's mm-hmm. what I was thinking. How could you do this to me?
Mm-hmm.
And she was trying to show me the difference between trying to separate myself from my alcoholic, mm-hmm. and I didn't see that separation at the time.
Right. Right. Did he talk badly? Like, I can just imagine you guys driving to the motel, and what was there a conversation in the car where he was kind of reinforcing what she had done and how cruel it was? Or
yes.
Was there, yeah, I could see that sort of, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Because it was all about how awful.
Yeah, that's what addiction wants, though. Like, addiction wants to separate. What you just described is so common. It happened to me, too, where we lose our friends because addiction wants to separate us from anyone that is going to be strong and set boundaries. Because addiction doesn't, I'm not tolerating this as a threat. So, of course, you know, the reaction from your husband is going to be to speak poorly of that because she's a threat to his habits.
Yes, and she was the worst person on the planet, according to him, and how could I consider her my best friend? So,
can you look back on her decision and respect it?
I 100% respect it, and I thank her for it. Because to snap out of being so codependent and realize that what was happening in my life was not normal behavior for everybody.
Yeah, how do we get there? I mean, I think what you're saying is there's such truth to it. It's like we were healthy people, relatively healthy. I mean, we all came into this relationship with baggage, right? And low self-esteem, and we were enablers, and we were people pleasers. I mean, the typical codependent stuff. But for the most part, our lives were not as chaotic and dysfunctional as when we're married or in love with somebody who suffers from addiction. And somehow we get to the point, it's like, I think it's just a really slow progression where we start, one day we just wake up and it's craziness is going on all around us. And we start to think that, like, oh, well, this is just it. Like, this is my life. It's completely normal.
Yes.
It's fascinating how that happens, isn't it?
It's, and it's so funny because when you're in it, you cannot see your way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that happens, and it's almost as quick as snapping of your fingers. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, how did I get here? So you're like, this is not okay. And
not okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my moment. That was my aha moment in 2014.
I love that. So what happened after that?
I went to my first Al-Anon meeting, and I couldn't even get through introducing myself. I just started to cry.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really lucked out because since then I've been to some other Al-Anon meetings, and I ended up just finding God just put this group of women into my life right at the time I needed them. Not all Al-Anon groups are the same, and
Mm-hmm.
I really, really want people to know that if you don't get what you need from one, try others, because it really can be helpful to be in a group of other people who are in your situation, or they're not going to judge you. That was the first time I knew I wasn't being judged for my life and what I was dealing with. And that was freedom for me, because I just felt like everybody was looking and watching and saying, oh, she's the one that's married to the alcoholic, and so it was such a breakthrough to go through and get into the Al-Anon. And at first I just attended, and that made me feel better, but I didn't really actually try to work the program. And then I started to read Codependent No More. That was a big help. And the best thing about this disease is that it really did bring me back to my relationship with God, because that had been missing for years. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love that a book can help you do that. When did you and how did you find Love Over Addiction, or Confident Life, which we call now Love Over Mistakes?
Oh, it is love. I was wondering if that was it, because I'm like, I don't know what happened to the program.
We just changed the name. Where did that go?
I had some friends that had come up. I live near Lake Tahoe, so for me, skiing, being out and skiing is just something that brings me such happiness and such joy and freedom. Because you're by yourself. You're with other people, but you're by yourself. It's between you and yourself. And being in the mountains and the snow and exercising, it was one of those moments where it's like, oh, I just love this. So I had a friend over, and we started Googling, married to alcoholics and this and that. And I can't remember, there was a website, and then yours, the Confident Wife, showed up. So I started to read that to my friend, and she's like, that is wonderful. And she's like, what do you have to buy? I'm like, oh, I don't know. So I found the Confident Wife, and I listened to that, and that brought me more healing than the year that I spent in Al-Anon, because it was actual, listening to your words that you had been through this. And it was, because Al-Anon, they give you the tools, but it's up to you to work the program and do that. But your program had real advice and real techniques that was for real life. So
thank you for sharing that. That's exactly why I wrote it, because I'm one of those people where I went to a couple meetings too, and did not fit in at all, and left feeling a lot more depressed than when I started. And I love your point that there are different types of groups. I think that's really important to mention, because we don't want to talk badly about anything or any organization. Any organization that does helps women is a good organization, But for me, I just felt like I wanted to know what practically I could do. Like, I loved the idea of sharing and not being judged, but I'm an action-oriented woman. And it's funny that you said that, because I find that this program and our community attracts a certain type of woman. And the women that we attract are very, action-oriented women. They're the women who really are looking for practical how-tos and not necessarily a lot of self-help fluff, if that makes sense. You know,
total sense.
Yeah, and that's why I couldn't find a program like that. I was like, okay, I'm going home right now, and I know he's going to be drunk, and what do I do with that? Like, how do I manage that situation? And I have 3 kids, you know, and so that's why I love when people say that. That brings such joy to my heart, because that's exactly why I created the program. I'm like, there has to be practical tools. And I just literally started to do everything, and then started taking notes on what worked and what didn't, and what got results and what was just the exact opposite of getting good results. And did that for, you know, I think, 10 years before I created this. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. That makes me feel really good.
Well, I really owe you such deep gratitude, because I would not be able to be back to understanding myself for the first time, I think, in my life, and being okay with who I am. If it wasn't for this program. So there again, it's like I'm trying to live my life in gratitude. I hope I'm pretty sure you could tell that. I'm not. Yes. I'm no longer that victim person that I lived in with my denial. And I think that was part of the reason I stayed in denial, because all of a sudden, here's all this attention for me being this victim. But being in gratitude, I'm just loving that I have control again over my life, and I don't have to please everybody. And that, for me, is huge, that I don't have to worry. I love that saying, what other people say about you is none of your business. So, because that's pretty much, I didn't want anybody to say anything bad about me. I just had to be all things to everybody and try and be, you know, things that I wasn't at the time. So I'm grateful, and I love this.
I love what you're saying. I absolutely adore what you're saying, because I'm listening to you. I can sense, you know, you have a sense of confidence and clarity, and peace, and I can feel it in your voice, and I can hear it in your words, and that's what you're giving off, and that's genuine. It's not this panicked chaos or this victim or this anger, which is all places that I know I've gone to many times and stayed stuck in many times. But what I hear from you is just a very centered, confident woman. And you know what I love the most is that you're here, and I don't have any idea whether he got sober or not, but you've arrived here regardless of his story, like regardless of what he's been doing in your life or the promise he's broken or made or kept. Do you recognize that?
And, you know, I really hadn't until you said that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am working this program, and it is working in me. That's so true, because all of a sudden it went from, oh my gosh, see, you're wonderful. And I'm in the middle of going through a divorce.
Oh gosh, okay, let's talk about that. Let's get there. So you started working the program, and thank you to your friend who said that it was great. So what happened? I mean, were you still living in the house with the hole in the wall? Did that get fixed?
That finally got fixed.
It got fixed. Okay.
Yes,
so
it did get fixed.
What happened? How did you get to the point of the divorce?
Family and friends had tried for the past few years to get him to go to rehab. Mm-hmm. And he would commit to going, and then at the last minute he would not go. I'll go next month. I'll go after this vacation. I'll go in the fall. And he never went. So he couldn't even hold down doing any small jobs or anything. And so I was basically, we own properties, so we have a lot of rentals. And I was doing everything. I was having to find people to take care of things that he used to be able to do. My mom, well, Labor Day weekend is when it really started for me, because we got to meet, his son had a baby, and we finally got to meet our granddaughter, and he was so drunk he had to have a friend drive him, because I had already made plans. I was coming up from a visit with my two boys. I have one in Southern California and one in the Bay Area, and his son is also in the Bay Area. So I was driving back from Southern California, and we were going to meet to get together and meet our new granddaughter, and he was so drunk his friend had to drive him. And he was so, he wasn't even there. He was there physically, but he was not even there mentally. And I was so afraid he was going to drop the baby. I said, that's awful. That was so awful and terrible to see. And that was the first weekend also that I got to reconnect with my best friend. So I was spending the night there at her house in the Bay Area, and he did not like that one bit. But I said, I'm doing it. It's not your choice. And yeah, so when I finally got back home up to Lake Tahoe, he just started yelling and saying that I was the worst person ever. And then he took the safe deposit box key, and he was going to leave me. And he's done that a few times before, and this time I finally just said, okay, I'm fine with that. Well, that didn't turn out to be the answer he wanted to hear. So
okay, wait, can I stop you? Because I have like two major points I want to make, because I'm like, okay, if you were in the room, I would just be giving you a giant high five. Okay, so the fact that you said I'm staying at my best friend's house and there's nothing you can do about that, that is you being absolutely perfect and standing up to this disease. Like, that's what we talk about in the community when we say we love over addiction. Our community does not believe that we are powerless over this disease. You know, that is a lie. Like, you just gave us a beautiful, perfect example of a way that you exercised your free will and your personal choice to stand up to this disease and make a decision and a healthy choice for you that benefited you. And I think that is worth parking on for just a second and recognizing. So that's terrific and well done, because I know that's not easy. I know that comes from a deep place of courage and conviction. And I know that, you know, even when we're there, I don't know, I can't imagine you spending the night. And I know for me, when I went to those places of courage, there was a little part of me that was worried about the anger and sticking up, you know, to him. But I think you followed through, and that is fantastic. So well done.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, but
You're welcome.
I did get the wrath at when we both ended up getting back to the house. And
I'm sure you did. Yeah.
So what I did the next day is I went and I took my items out of the safe deposit box, and I opened up my very own safe deposit box.
Oh my gosh.
And I
Fabulous.
just said at that point, I'm done. If he wants to go and deal with this, he was acting like a spoiled 2-year-old. I just said, that's it. I don't have to worry about it anymore. So I'd had enough, and I made an appointment to see an attorney. So I saw an attorney the end of September. I had to change my appointment because in September we drove up to the Oregon coast to celebrate his aunt's 80th birthday. And that was the trip also where I set up my boundaries. I ended up doing all the driving. Mm-hmm. And I set up the boundaries that he could not drink in the car while I was driving.
Oh, brilliant.
So it took a lot longer to drive because you had to stop every so often. And I made him get out of the car and walk, I'd get him a place under a tree so he wouldn't be in the hot boiling sun, and he would go and down a couple of beers real quick. And his family they were very supportive of me, and they said, you have changed. And I didn't tell them at the time, because this was also after I'd started the Love Over Addiction program. And that just gave me strength. So I would go into the bedroom when everybody was busy, and I would go and listen to some of the program with the headphones on so that I could just get my strength to get through this vacation. So it was great.
That is amazing. I love that my voice was there with you. I wish I could have been there with you. That just makes me feel so good. Okay, so you're on this trip with him. You've set the boundary, which is another big high five to you, that you're going to do the driving regardless of the sacrifices of it taking longer than it's necessary. So what happens on the trip, and what happens when you get back?
So on the trip, he got into arguments and fights with every single person that was there. He had aunts and cousins and friends of aunts and cousins, and his mom and his sister, of course me, and friends that lived next door to the aunt. And everybody was pretty much just ready to throw him out. So I gathered all our stuff, and we somehow made it through the trip, and they all said he needs to go to rehab. But nobody would stand up and tell him. They just would tell me. And I said, well, you need to tell him.
Good for you. Good for you. Like, don't own that. Give that right back to them.
Yeah, because I had taken that responsibility for too many years. So we made it back home, and he just continued on his way with drinking and not being responsible. And then I met with my attorney, and she gave me steps to do. And the reason I chose her was because she was, number one, a woman of faith, and to me that was important. And number two, when she was in law school, she worked with alcoholics. So I knew she would not try to make him out to be a horrible person. I knew she would be okay with and fair, and recognize that the disease and him were two separate things. So
that's terrific. I love that you have remained dignified and classy with this. I think so often divorce gets a bad rap because people assume that we're out to get everything, and we're just nasty about it, and we're selfish about it. And that doesn't always have to be the case. You can choose to be, I love the word you just used, you can choose to be fair to yourself and fair to him. And you're right, treat him, be very dignified and very, not, it doesn't sound to me like you were just going to lay down and hand over everything, but it sounds like you were being sensitive to the fact that you were working with somebody who was sick, who has an illness.
Yes. Yeah. So, and it took me almost 6 months to get my ducks in a row. The best advice she gave me, and I've shared this on the Facebook group, is take things out of your house that are important to you. Get them to your friends, your families, get a storage unit, which is what I ended up doing. But I got all the photos of my kids and their art projects and just different things over the years, Christmas presents or Christmas gifts, ornaments that my kids have made. Those are the things that can't be replaced. So I got those out, and then
because I did not
ended
do
up
that.
leaving.
And those things in my life were destroyed because this disease is vicious and will do terrible things. And it's not the man doing the things, the disease is doing the things. And I've forgiven, and that's the way I forgive, is by recognizing that the man I loved is a good man, but this disease is taking him over. But a lot of my very, very precious things were destroyed, and my family's precious things. So that advice is key, absolutely. The moment, and I do think that taking 6 months to plan is so important. You said that it's not bad, like taking that amount of time to really be thoughtful and diligent about it is the best approach, as opposed to just being kind of a knee-jerk reaction, like, I'm out of here. Those types of threats or leaving, usually, for me at least, they always ended me back up at home in bed with him, feeling like a fool. It's the thoughtful, meticulous planning that really helps it comes from a very mature, wise place that helps us have a graceful exit, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it can ever be graceful, but I need to tell you the bonus section of the Love Over Addiction, your story of when you knew, when the time was right to leave or when you left him. I used to listen to that and I'm like, nope, I do my gut check. Nope, I'm not there yet. And when I did leave and I listened to it the very next day, I knew I had reached that point. So that bonus to me was so amazing. It was so truthful, so honest, and it just helped me do my gut check and recognize that I wasn't there. And then when I did leave, I knew I was there.
Terrific. So true. So brilliant and true. Because how often, did you ever try and leave before and came back? Or were you always just, you don't sound like that type of person. You sound like you maybe might have thought of it many times, but not, did the gut check. Did you ever try to physically leave? Did you ever get in your car, drive away and say, I'm not coming back? Or was there always just a knowing that this is where you needed to be and you weren't ready to make the changes yet?
I did not ever leave. My alcoholic did that plenty enough for both of us.
Oh, is that right? Was that his MO, leaving?
Yes, that was his MO. He would take all the cash that he could find. He would take both sets of car keys, and I would be stranded at home, and he would leave.
Oh my goodness. Both sets of cars. So you didn't have to leave because you were the one being left.
I was the one being left.
Yeah. So where are you? Okay, let's talk about your future, because I'm very excited. How are you feeling today about where you're at, and what are you most excited about for your future?
I know I'm in the best place I could ever be in mentally at this point in my life. I am in control of my own destiny and my own future. Whatever God has planned for me, I can do. And I know I'm going to be okay. I don't think, I've told myself I'm going to take a whole year before I make any major decisions. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to sell the house. I'm not going to get involved with any new romantic relationships. I'm just going to exist and be and keep learning. That's what I'm going to do. But I'm so excited because I have my relationships with my family, especially my sons, has never been better. They've just been the most wonderful and caring sons. And I posted also in our Facebook group that I got to go to Disneyland to celebrate my son's 35th birthday. I had kids young, but yeah, and we had the best time ever. We recreated photos from when they were little in Disneyland until now.
That's great.
And
I love it.
I just feel like I feel like the fog's been lifted. I can appreciate life. I'm doing things that I used to get criticized for. I'm trying to do all kinds of different things, different recipes that I can try now because my alcoholic didn't like anything I cooked. So I'm having the best time at one of the worst times of my life, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. Total sense. I can so relate to everything that you're saying. I remember going through what people would consider a dark and difficult time in my life, going through the divorce. I was getting restraining orders. I was hiding in hotels. I was just stretched. But that was just, if you ask me during the whole last, 10 years that I was with him, when was the best time? It was that time, because I was growing into the best part of me. It was like shedding a skin, shedding a layer, and like appearing and arriving in like the most beautiful form of myself that I had ever been, and being connected in a way to just this like unbelievable courage and power and something greater than myself that I had never had before. And it was just a beautiful time in my life. And I always look back on that and say, I'm so grateful for that time. And I'm so grateful for the pain that led up to that time. Without that pain, we wouldn't have arrived here.
No, that's so true. So that's part of the thing. It's like, what am I grateful for having been married to an alcoholic? And it's because if I hadn't been, I wouldn't be where I am right now today.
Amen. Absolutely. I wouldn't give it back for a second. I'd marry him again. I would. I'd do it all over again. As crazy as that sounds, I would, because I don't think there's any other way I could have gotten here. And I'm so excited for your future. I really love what you're saying about taking a year space and not making any major changes, allowing yourself to listen, to be led to the next steps. That's very, very smart, very wise.
Well, it's also because in my past, like I said, I'd been separated from my first husband only 3.5 months when my alcoholic came and started, he was just so wonderful and nice. So that was too soon. Even though we waited 7 years to get married, it was too soon to get into another relationship. And I don't know. At this point, I'm fine if I never have another relationship. I think that's what part of it was when I knew it was okay for me to leave and it was time. I didn't have to be in a relationship. I just needed to be myself.
In other words, you weren't afraid of being alone.
I wasn't afraid. The first time in my life I've ever been alone. So, and I'm okay with it, finally, at 57 years old. Woohoo!
Hey, and you know what? Thank you for mentioning your age, because I will tell you, I get emails every week from women that are in their late 50s, 60s,